Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is a Monday, October 27th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? That chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 21 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience that I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again, absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows like this one where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you listen to them, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words HeartLand Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app. It contains the Reality Management Worksheet, contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon and Klingon Game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives, and secondarily because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. And if you have any of those to share with us, we would greatly appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you through the email, we will address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or your input. Alternatively, if you are able to, you may join us live. You can go to zoom.us from 11 to noon most weekdays. And on the first hour, our meeting ID number is 853-2357-4173. That's 853-2357-4173. If you're using the phone alone to get in, you'll be muted when you start, and then you can use *6 to mute and unmute. And Don, it seems like you have unmuted. Was that intentional?
No. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Just wanted to make sure we didn't miss out on an opportunity to say hello. So it is a Monday, and I was finally able, because the shows didn't get uploaded right away because Michael and Jeanie were on vacation. But I did finally get to listen to the second hour of Thursday and Friday's show, and both were powerful in different ways. And we are here. We are here with the ability to go back to Guy Finley's book, or we can go back to reading from Alan Watts, or we can go back to square one, as they say. As it happens with reading Guy Finley's book, The Book of One Love, One Life, One Journey with Dr. Ellen Dickstein, we're just about halfway through, and we've spent a few days doing other things. So feel free to raise a hand and unmute, and or just unmute and speak up. And I'll get back to reading. We're in chapter 4 of this book. The title of the next section is Transcendent Peace. Rise above life's uncertainties. Guy writes, we find ourselves in an unwanted situation. And whenever we do, it often seems like things will stay that way forever. One day, when we find ourselves alone, we tell ourselves that we'll always be lonely. Maybe our plans are thwarted and we feel like we'll never be happy. Even physically, when we have a headache or a bout of indigestion, it seems like it will never feel okay again. Our minds are always quick to jump in and paint a bleak picture of our future. And oddly, we take that grim picture as true. Lots of different people have theorized why it is that evolutionarily we might have overpredicted for the negative. But the fact of the matter is we experience it time and time and time again. However, just because we have all these negative thoughts, it doesn't mean that's how life is going to pan out. And we could just as easily start believing a more positive option. The guy goes on and writes, but as easy as it is to get discouraged when our own thoughts tell us that this will never change, it has long been understood that no matter how any moment may appear, the truth is this too shall pass. It's our own resistance that holds these moments in place, which means difficult moments pass for us when our work of self-discovery shows us those inner voices don't know anything, and then we stop listening to them. The point is, if it's negative, it's false. We try and talk about that on a regular basis. It's one of the bottom line observations. We encourage people to just observe this for yourself. How many times in your life have you had a thought like, I can't handle this. I'm not going to make it through this. Things aren't going to work out. This could be the end. I can't stomach another day. Well, if you're still alive, then every one of those times that those thoughts have come up, they've been false. And you can just use your own observation to reach the same kind of conclusion that I often get when I observe in the bottom line observation that says, if I have a negative thought about myself or a negative emotion going about anything in my life or somebody else, I can instantly know three things. Number one, it's a lie or based on a falsehood. It doesn't matter how good the logical structure is, it makes it seem true. If it's based in a falsehood, it all falls apart. The second thing is I can know instantly is it's not happening right now. I'm not upset about what's going on right now. There's something about this that I'm either bringing back an upset from the past or projecting an upset into the future. And the third thing I can know is if I decide to take an action from this, if I sit here thinking about it or spin in thought or speak or act from it, I'm just going to make my life situation worse, not better. So he says, you can watch how your resistance holds until you do the work of self-discovery and you learn that those inner voices don't really know anything, and then we stop listening to them. Guy goes on, with clearer eyes, we're now able to welcome the ever-changing flow of real life. It may not always bring what we want, but it always brings new opportunity of an unexpected and transformational kind. When we stop insisting that our own demands must be met, reread that, when we stop holding goals that we can't meet, we don't have the power to change to meet, when we stop insisting that our own demands must be met, the doors of the universe are flung open. When you cancel every need to be right and you cancel every goal you're holding on to, you fling the doors of the universe wide open. He writes, everything comes and then passes away. It's the law of life. When we come into harmony with that law, these things, these comings and goings are seen as part of the natural flow. And we're created to deal with them, both the pain and the joy. Guy writes, here's some wisdom, old and new, that gives some deeper understanding. Buddha, impermanent are all component things. Nothing comes into existence, but there is the seeds of its own dissolution. In other words, everything that begins in time ends in time, the way it's stated in The Way of Mastery. Marcus Aurelius is quoted as saying, all things change, yet we need not fear anything new. Another quote here, the conscious self is that which remains constant in its pure universality, though all particular changeful experiences flow through it. And Dostoevsky is quoted as saying, it's the great mystery of human life that old grief passes gradually into quiet, tender joy. And then Adelaide Ann Proctor writes, one by one, bright gifts from heaven, joys are sent thee here below. Take them readily when given, ready to let them go. One by one thy griefs shall meet thee, do not fear an armed band. One will fade as others greet thee, and shadows passing through the land. Guy writes, it's clear we're not the only ones who seek after the comfort of knowing that there are things we can count on, that there is something permanent in this life. Yet everything seems to slip away from us. People, places, and events, they all change. And as they go, so does our sense of security, leaving us once again seeking something to give us a permanent sense of well-being. There is a cure for this seemingly endless longing. It is a spiritual one. Something does exist that isn't temporary. Something is permanent. However, to find it, we must first lose our misplaced faith in those things that have always let us down in the past. How many times have we thrown out a false psychological anchor that has been passed off on us as a solid one? With each one, we thought that this time we would be safe in this job, safe in this relationship, safe in this new home, only to find ourselves eventually wrecked on some jagged reef. Even the anchor of anger, which seemed so justified, might have made us feel strongly solid for a while before it too melted away, leaving us empty and perhaps a little embarrassed. And false anchors don't always lead us into negative situations. Sometimes things do seem to work out. Perhaps the relationship does last, but again, the comfort is impermanent. The longing for something more returns and tells us that even our best relationship is not the answer to the emptiness inside. So we throw out new anchors. So many that we never notice our recurring crashes on the shoals because the idea of our next safe anchorage is ready to rescue us at a moment's notice. Is there such a thing as a permanent anchor that doesn't dissolve and therefore cast us adrift? A permanent anchor does exist. But before we can benefit from its steady hold, we must break the cycle of suffering inherent in our unquestioned trust of and hope for security in our many, many false anchors. So the permanent anchor does exist. But before we can benefit from it, we have to break the cycle of suffering that's inherent in our unquestioned trust of and hope for security in the false anchors. So we've got to quit doing what we're already doing that doesn't work to make a space for something we could do that would actually help, that would actually let us connect with and become aware of and live from the awareness of that permanent consciousness, awareness that is our true nature. So he writes, there can never be a permanent anchor in this physical world of ours because the sea of time dissolves everything. Even we dissolve in the sea of time. This is not a fact to fear, but one to understand. Facts like these lead us to discover the one thing that isn't temporary, something right in the center of each of us that can't come unglued and that is never blown off course. Deep within us lies a true awareness that is a part of our genuine self. Some people say your higher self, your true self, your capital S self, your core self, your wisdom being self, or that part of you that can connect with Ruka Dakucha, that elemental force specific to humans, that's implanted in you at the moment of your creation as consciousness, that's there to break off the effects of your errors in thought and guide you to truth and happiness. So whatever you call it, it doesn't matter. What all these great teachings are telling us is that there's something right in the center of each of us that can't come unglued, can't fall apart, and can't be blown off course. Guy goes on, deep within us lies a true awareness that is a part of our genuine self. This higher awareness is both bedded in capital P permanence and is itself part of that solid ground. At any moment, we can actually see the false self in action. We are, in that split second of awareness, actually standing on this higher ground and in touch with something permanent within us. So as you do your work, whether it's worksheets or journaling or EFT tapping or yoga or Tai Chi, and you are looking at how your thought disorders, as Michael Ryce would call them, your patterns of thought that leave you feeling angry, sad, scared, hurt, frustrated, that when you see them as false, that process of being able to see them as false is happening because you're standing on this higher ground. He writes, you can use the following exercise to encourage these special moments of self-awakening. At least once a day, for at least 5 minutes, know what you're doing the entire time. Just know it. Just pay attention. Just be aware and awake in the moment. In allowance and acceptance and surrender. For at least 5 minutes, once each day, know exactly what you're doing the entire time. so that something in you remains aware of each changing thought and each changing feeling, and yet you notice how that part of you that notices those thoughts and feelings doesn't change with them. Instead, it watches them come and go. Instead of identifying with the sense of self that thoughts lend you, you can be there to say bye-bye as each thought leaves the stage of your consciousness. He writes, staying anchored in awareness of ourselves in this way is the beginning of the birth of our authentic true self. This higher awareness of ourselves is both in the flow of what's going on and yet outside the flow of time. It cannot be dissolved. In the beginning of our attempts to stay anchored within ourselves, we will find it difficult to remain newly aware for more than a few moments at a time. But even our failed attempts to bring a new self-understanding, that will bring, even trying and failing will bring a new understanding that we couldn't even have guessed at before. So we may not make it, but in the process of trying, we learn. And in the process of trying, making an attempt, seeing how it unfolds, assessing for ourselves, discerning whether or not we prefer the consequences of that choice, in that process, we learn. And it starts to show us a level of self-understanding we couldn't even have guessed at before. Guy goes on and writes, one of our greatest lessons comes when we actually catch ourselves in the process of dropping an anchor, in other words, doing a behavior or clinging to a thought or performing a judgment and pouring our mind energy into it, that we think will supply us with a new sense of permanence. We acquire a new relationship, or we get a better job, or we buy the car we've always wanted, and we think that's going to make our contentment and our joy last. And it doesn't. And then once again, we watch that anchor dissolving as things start shifting, because the real shifting and the false belief of lack or loss is inside of us. So all these things we might use as anchors, which are outside of us, are doomed to fail. They might be a temporary distraction, but they can't bring lasting that sense of permanence that he's talking about here. Because no matter what we change on the outside, it's never enough. He writes, as we learn to watch this happening again and again, we begin to understand that our thoughts about ourselves and what they tell us we need for security have no substance in themselves. And so bit by bit, it dawns on us. We can't think ourselves into permanence. We can see ourselves in the act of creating and then dropping a false anchor, however, and it is this higher awareness that brings with it the real permanence that we have been seeking. Although these moments of inner magic don't last long, as it isn't in our power to will ourselves into lasting self-awareness. But we always have the opportunity to catch ourselves again and again. This inner work of waking up and letting go, waking up and letting go, it's like opening sails and catching fish or fresh, friendly winds over and over again. It's just like, this is the example of sailing he's using. When you're out in a sailboat, you are constantly changing and adapting to what arises with the wind, with the waves, with other obstructions in the water, or other vessels. So he writes, Past troubled waters smooth out. Even new storms don't shake us the way they used to. For a new anchor begins to secure us in the permanent waters of capital R reality. What's that capital R reality? That's that part of you that can be aware of everything that arises and falls and moves through you. So I'm going to stop there and ask if people are following this. Guy makes some very strong claims, right? Fear ends here, the revelation that changes everything. And then he says, here's how to, find transcendent peace and rise above life's uncertainties. And does it make sense to you how you might find transcendent peace and rise above life's uncertainties by this simple 5-minute practice? He says, we're suggesting that you just at least once each day for at least 5 minutes get your mind to stay awake and aware of everything that happens outside of you and in your own mind. Every thought, every judgment, every reflexive response. How could that lead you to feeling this solid, deep sense of permanence that you're craving? That basically every drug and every addiction is there to either, numb out from or avoid dealing with. So just take a breath here and let this settle in for people. Is this making sense? And I would mention that somewhere on Thursday or Friday, we were talking about the Roman Wyden interview, and several people requested it, and I was finally able to get that modified and send it out this morning. So if you did not get a copy of the Roman Wyden interview for early release, which is available now, just email me. And I now have the link that I can just click and send, and it should be understandable. There were some technical problems with the recording, but I think I have it in a format where you can at least comprehend everything that's being said. So, Guy Finley, Dr. Ellen Dickstein, will return to the reading. He writes, the next section is titled, Jump Off the Pain Train and Stop Suffering for Nothing. Guy writes, pain is a universal condition. We're talking about inner pain, depression, guilt, regret, anger, any of 1,000 different negative emotions that tear us apart. Pain begins when life goes against our expectations and desires. Distress goes through us. It's uncomfortable. And not liking it, but not knowing how to deal with it, we resist it and push it away. In our efforts to get free of pain, we find someone or something to blame, possibly even ourselves. And blame leads to hate, and hate leads to taking actions and dwelling on punishing thoughts that accomplish nothing except to increase our pain. But there's something else we can do with our pain. We can begin to see it as a signal to look inside ourselves. An athlete who feels a physical pain knows it's time to see what he or she is doing wrong that's causing the discomfort. In the same way, psychological pain tells us we're doing something wrong that's harming us, making us unhappy, and putting us at enmity with life. C.S. Lewis was quoted as saying, pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Guy writes, throughout time, the great sages have taught us that pain, used properly, is an invitation to enter a new level of ourselves. That new level of ourselves knows how to use the frustrations of life to grow stronger, more in command, more self-confident, and less resentful when things don't go our way. Suffering, and this is the Buddha quoted as saying, suffering, if it does not diminish love, will transport you to the furthest shore. Suffering, if it does not diminish love, will transport you to the furthest shore. So my mind is saying here, this is exactly what Dr. Michael Ryce is teaching when he says, when anything unlike love comes up and you've practiced or you've got friends around you who can practice holding love, conscious, active, and present, that loving energy transmutes the suffering, transmutes the pain, transmutes the negative emotional state, or the belief system that's giving rise to it. Guy Finley writes, of course, disappointment is inevitable in life. And when these things don't go as we wish, we can't help but react. But as we see things from a higher level of understanding, we know how to deal with this pain in a more healthy way than by chewing over and over on it in our minds and our images that we don't like looking at. Confucius is quoted as saying, you cannot prevent the birds of sadness from flying over your head, but you can keep them from building nests in your hair. Guy writes, we begin to take responsibility for our own reactions and are willing to recognize what we ourselves do to keep this pain going, such as reliving painful experiences and letting resentment grow. This can happen. He's saying, we can begin to take responsibility for our own reactions. We can begin to be willing to recognize that we ourselves are doing this process of thought and grabbing thoughts or pushing them away, which is keeping the pain going. We're doing that through reliving painful experiences and pouring our mind energy into thoughts of resentment, etc. And seeing where we've been wrong can be painful, but it's the conscious suffering that transforms us. In other words, consciously allowing whatever's there to unfold. That's like a definition I would offer you for the word suffering. It's an archaic use of the definition, is to allow, to sit with. It doesn't mean suffering because you're in agonizing pain. It means that whatever comes up, whether it's pain or fear or sadness or physical pain, you breathe and soften and allow that energy to move through you. That's the allowance part, is the archaic meaning of the use of the word suffering here. So as we learn to just sit with these energies that move through us, we suffer ourselves, we sit with ourselves, we allow and surrender to whatever's moving through ourselves, then the transformation just happens. It's not us thinking about how to transform these things, it's that they get transformed. He quotes Carl Jung as saying, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And then Guy writes, every great religion talks about how we can learn to use suffering to ultimately become free of suffering. It's the basis of our transformation into the whole, healthy, happy people we are meant to be. And yet, I forget what movie I was watching yesterday where they were marching through the streets and they had cat o' nine tails and they were whipping themselves and literally tearing flesh and there's blood and guts and they were consciously inflicting pain on themselves and praying, dear Lord, accept this pain. And it's an important piece when I work with people to understand that's not the kind of suffering we're talking about in the spiritual traditions. The suffering we're talking about in the spiritual traditions is allowing, breathing, softening, observing, asking to be taught by the flow of life rather than resisting it, and or rather than blaming it on someone or something else and then using my mind energy to generate resentment thoughts. So the next section is titled Discover the Treasure That's Hidden in any unwanted moment. Guy writes, needless to say, hardly a day goes by that we don't find ourselves frustrated, rushing, resentful, even over minor disruptions. And then there are the major losses and trials that tax us to the core. To say the least, our lives aren't perfect. This is just the way it is. It's the very nature of life that we will experience change, that our will is going to clash with the will of others and with how events play out, and that our preferences are not all going to be met. But are these moments when we feel a loss devoid of purpose? Do they hold no value for us? Or do they actually hold a secret gift? Can the moment that feels so distressing at the time ultimately provide us with benefits that seem impossible to imagine while we're feeling so bad and we seem to be set adrift? Of course, his conclusion is yes. If we look at what the wise ones have said over the centuries, we will find a consistent message that each moment of our lives, even and perhaps especially the unwanted ones, can help us develop into the more perfected selves we have the potential to become. Here's just a taste of this wisdom from William Cowper. Quote, the path of sorrow, and that path alone, leads to the land where sorrow is unknown. No traveler ever reached that blessed abode who found not thorns and briars on his road. And then Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, quote, it is always in the epicenter of your troubles that you find serenity. It is always in the epicenter of your troubles that you find serenity. And then Simone Weil writes, quote, in general, we must not wish for the disappearance of any of our troubles, but grace to transform them. In other words, don't wish for the trouble to disappear, wish for grace to transform the trouble. Wish for yourself to be taught by this expression of life, by this flow of life. And then he quotes Vernon Howard, his favorite teacher, quote, there is value in everything that happens to you, especially in those moments that appear sorrowful or troublesome. Suffering can supply us with the very ending of suffering if we listen to its lesson. Fear, when carefully examined, can free us from fear. Guy writes, there's no denying that life is filled with challenges and disappointments and painful heartbreak. So much of the strife we see in the world is because people don't know what to do with their pain, and so they look for someone or something else to blame. This only exacerbates the misery in the world, but we miss out on the secret gift hidden in every difficulty. We're meant to use all these unwanted moments for our professional transformation, to become stronger, more compassionate, more aware of the bigger picture, and to develop more faith in the ultimate goodness of the universe. So I'm going to read that last long sentence again. We are meant to use all of the unwanted moments for our personal transformation. We're meant to use them to become stronger and more compassionate and more aware of the bigger picture. Now, as I read that, I'm put to mind of a quote from a Guy Finley talk that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but in the talk he makes the statement that there is an unseen cosmic curriculum. He might say an invisible, unseen cosmic curriculum. So it's not just that it's unseen because we're not looking for it, it's invisible. And yet it's there. So there's an unseen cosmic curriculum whose entire purpose, the goal of the course that we take in this cosmic curriculum, is to awaken the student or each soul to the existence of the intelligence that created the curriculum. That's the whole purpose. So imagine this. Imagine that you go to college for 4 years and the entire purpose of everything you're taught and the reason you go there and pay all that money is just so you can know who created the college. It seems ridiculous. I go to get a college degree because I want a job, and I want a job with this kind of high-ranking company, and I want to learn how to save the ecosystem. Or what if all of this, in a way that we can't get to with our conscious logical mind, and you certainly can't get to if you are clinging to a sense of materiality as all there is, then it doesn't make any sense. But Guy Finley says, look, there is an unseen cosmic curriculum, and the only point of the curriculum is to wake us up to the intelligence that created the curriculum. In other words, there's a lot more going on here than we can be aware of with our 5 senses, or our conscious logical minds can comprehend, or our language can express. Guy goes on and writes, there's no denying that this life is filled with challenges and disappointments. And it's because these people don't know what to do with their pain. This only exacerbates the misery in the world, but we miss out on the secret life in every hidden difficulty. We're meant to use every unwanted moment for our own personal transformation. We can learn to do that process while everything seems to be falling apart around us. Welcome the following higher ideas into your heart and mind. Let them lead you to a new kind of happiness that can never be taken away from you. And the next section is titled, The Key to Using Unwanted Moments for Self-Elevation. And Guy writes, to be able to see any life event, good or bad, as a vehicle to help transport us from our present level of understanding to a higher one, this requires that we develop a new relationship with unwanted events in our lives. And now this next sentence is in italics. Instead of trying to protect ourselves from them, we must become willing to see what they are revealing to us about ourselves in that same moment. Now, I read that line and I instantly thought of Andrea's work with Michael the other day on the show, and the idea of being able to stay open. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. In my awareness of my perfect freedom, my perfect safety lies. My perfect freedom and safety, they're there whether I realize them or not. I get to experience them when I realize them. I get to create an illusion that I'm in danger and I'm threatened and I need to be defensive if I choose. But the truth is, instead of trying to protect ourselves from these unwanted moments, we must become willing to see they're here for us, to reveal to us what we need to let go. Self-discovery is the core of this. We had that a few lessons ago in this work. The bottom line is self-discovery. Can you turn the focus inside yourself every time you're upset and use it to help you wake up to what you can release, put aside, see as false? Guy goes on and writes, the difference between these two paths and their attending possibilities cannot be overstated. When you are willing to see what these unwanted moments are revealing to you, it leads to a revelation that the divine already has a higher purpose for our life, one that includes all the powers we need to transcend any painful situation. While the former path, is denying and suppressing or blaming, it ensures that the fear and suffering that are inseparable from trying to protect the false images that we have about ourselves. And we just maintain our belief in these false images and their failed purposes. Yes, the path that leads to revelation is more difficult, but only in the beginning. Following its way, we're asked to look for the source of our suffering within us instead of our suffering letting it point us to outside of ourselves for things as the cause of our suffering. But why choose this route? Because it's only by deliberately illuminating, bringing the light of your own awareness into these darkened concerns of your own consciousness. This is where the shadowy parts of us work in secret to misdirect us. It's only by bringing the light of our awareness into that realm that their authority over us can be brought to an end. When I see something, clearly see it as false, I stop arguing about it. I stop arguing for it. He writes, though it may seem too steep a hill to climb, especially the first time we consider this ascent, nevertheless, here's the first step that leads to the freedom from the useless suffering. Quote, we must begin to doubt our own suffering. To this idea, the masses simply cry, impossible! Pain as real as ours is undeniable. And yet, no one is saying to deny this pain or to otherwise pretend it's not there. Yes, the feeling of pain is real. But here's what we must come to see if we would free ourselves. All the excuses we're handed by ourselves for why we must continue to hurt ourselves, these excuses are like flies that travel with trash. The only purpose they serve is to make something worthless seem valuable. Garbage is garbage, no matter how it comes wrapped. Consider closely the twin truths in the following summary of this study. Within them rests the understanding and the power that you need to start throwing out useless suffering. Here's one. The justification of any negative state serves one end only. That is the protection and preservation of the nature responsible for its manifestation. So, at one point in one of his talks, Guy Finley is trying to tell people about how it's all an inside job. And he says, you're having a day, you're having a fine day. And all of a sudden, somebody walks up and says or does something that you absolutely know they shouldn't be doing. And all of a sudden, there's an angry, irritable little person inside of you. Now, it wasn't there a minute ago, and you absolutely know what happened. You know this person came along and put an angry, irritable little person inside of you. And you solidify that by justifying your anger and justifying your blame and using all of the thoughts that you've generated in the process of perception to, quote, prove, close quotes, to you that you're right and the world around you is wrong, even though you're suffering, even though you're miserable. The justification of any negative state does only one thing, serves only one end, and that is it protects and preserves the nature that created this negative state. The second point is any part of our nature that finds good reason to justify our pain is the source of the pain that it justifies. Any part of our nature that finds good reason to justify our pain it is the source of the pain it justifies. So, got 5-7 minutes left for comment, question, answer, testimonial. I will leave it there because the next section probably wouldn't be able to be finished reading in the allotted time.
Dr. Tim, what is the title of the book that you're reading?
This is a book that is not available to the general public yet, but it is by Guy Finley with Dr. Ellen Dickstein, and the title is The Book of One, Love, One Life, One Journey.
You can actually get it from them now for $22, but it's not going to be officially published until sometime next year because apparently Guy's going to be making some changes to it.
Okay, and so did you get that on guyfinley.org.com?
No, I actually emailed them, and somebody named Chris, who runs Lifelong Learning, replied to me and said that I could buy it for $22 if I wanted to.
Excellent.
The Book of One, One Life, One Love, One
Journey.
Journey. Thank you.
One Love, One Life, One Journey. This is the cover.
Yeah, great. That's what I was looking for on Amazon, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, you won't find it on Amazon. This is labeled as a publisher's advance copy. I was only able to get it because I went out to the 25th and final Talks in the Pines out in Oregon in June. And when we were out there, they were giving that as a special allowance to those in attendance. Anything else from you, Terry, or anyone else?
Nope, I'm complete.
All right, thank you.
I would say I really love this book. I'm almost as excited, and it resonates with me almost as much as the Christian Sundberg book. It's just been amazing every time you read from it.
Well, thank you for saying so. I'm glad that it's beneficial. As I read Guy Finley's, for my own understanding, I need to switch up some words and change the pacing because he uses such long sentences, complex sentences, and it's not that they're wrong, it's just that he puts so much before there's any kind of a punctuation mark. And I get that sense when I'm listening to him sometimes when he's on a roll too, that in his own head there is no punctuation. It's just the stream he's getting. And I think that's a big part of why often in the support groups there'll be a person or two who just can't resonate with his work, doesn't seem to get much value out of listening to an hour-long talk. So I will let that be enough for today, and invite those of you that have gotten the Roman Wyden interview to offer feedback when you get a chance to listen to it. That episode and the episode 206 on the Radically Genuine podcast, he titles that An Explosive ADHD Debate That You Need to Hear between Dr. Roger McFillin, who's a psychologist, and Dr. Ryan Sultan, who is a psychiatrist who specializes in attention deficit disorder and its treatments. So I'm thoroughly enjoying that. I'm a little bit more than halfway through that second podcast. So thank you all for being here. I'm grateful for everyone who listens, and I'll just remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessing.